The three-time world champion is one power unit short of his pool after engine problems at the Canadian Grand Prix earlier this season, with team head Christian Horner acknowledging that he will inevitably face a penalty at a later period in the season. What are the chances for Max to change his power unit and getting a penalty at the Belgian GP this weekend? Let's find out. According to Racing News 365, the Red Bull driver may take a fresh power unit at the Belgian Grand Prix this weekend, exceeding his season allocation, resulting in a 10-place grid penalty for Sunday's race, with early forecasts predicting a wet weekend at Spa. He has already utilized his full allocation of permissible components for the season at least once, although troubles with one engine from the pool during free practice in Montreal forced him to take a new power unit earlier than planned. As a result, Horner confessed the team would have to take another engine for the three-time world champion at some point this season, and they would agree on a suitable point among themselves. I'm sure at some point we'll end up taking an extra engine for Max. It's just a question of when you choose strategically to do that, Horner recently explained to media. So we'll work with Honda on that, but inevitably, we will take a penalty at some point. According to Racing News 365, he will be fitted with a new internal combustion engine, with plenty of opportunities to overtake, and Verstappen has flown through the field there to victory in the past 2 years, starting 14th in 2022 and finishing 6th last year. Such a move, if it occurs, would continue a recent trend for Verstappen and Red Bull, with the Dutch driver winning from those positions on the grid after taking engine-related penalties at Spa in each of the previous 2 seasons. Despite arriving at the Hungaroring with 5 modifications for the RB20, Red Bull lacked the pace to challenge McLaren, which, combined with a questionable strategy, enraged Verstappen. Heading into the closing laps, having been undercut by Hamilton earlier in the race, the Red Bull driver made his move up the inside of Turn 1, but clipped the front right tire of the Mercedes, briefly launching him into the air. Verstappen lost 4th position to Charles Leclerc while airborne, but his RB20 continued, and the defending world champion finished 5th. The stewards investigated the event, but determined it was a racing collision, with neither driver punished. Their decision stated, "It was clear that Car 1 locked up both front wheels on the approach to Turn 1 prior to any impact occurring, but missing the normal cornering line for a typical overtaking maneuver." The driver of Car 44 stated that this was a racing incident, whilst the driver of Car 1 argued that this was a case of changing direction under braking. The stewards do not consider this to be a typical case of changing direction under braking, although it is our determination that the driver of Car 44 could have done more to avoid the collision. They added that no driver was predominantly to blame, hence the decision to take no further action. However, Marco believes Hamilton was to blame because he just turned in on the Red Bull driver. Marco described the race weekend in his Speed Week piece as follows. Then there was the last action. When Hamilton and Verstappen were lapping, Williams and Max spotted a gap, immediately jumped into the hole, and then there was a collision. I spoke to Verstappen about it. Of course, the wheels of his car locked when braking, but he would have made it through the corner, so there was no question of him losing control of his car. Max was ahead, but Hamilton just turned in. Everyone could see what happened then. So we ended up in 5th place, although we must not forget that in terms of pure speed, we were just behind McLaren. The incident concluded a difficult weekend for Red Bull, with Verstappen unimpressed with the team's upgrades, Red Bull's strategy, or the team's request that he hand over 2nd place to Lando Norris following their time on the first lap. The whole weekend was difficult, Marco conceded. For example, we missed pole position with Max by just 46 thousandths of a second, which annoyed Verstappen a lot because he had hoped that the improvements to the car would put us 2 tenths ahead of the competition. That wasn't the case. Then came the first lap of the race, with what I thought was a very good maneuver by Max, who got on the outside of the McLaren on the left, was then pushed off, moved into 2nd place, and gave that position back to be on the safe side. In retrospect, it is not 100% certain that Verstappen would have received a 5-second penalty there, so it might have been better to hold on to his position, simply because so much time is lost when overtaking on this track. One thing led to another. Emotions ran high, with comments from the race engineer and also from Max that were inappropriate, to put it politely. But he was not the only Red Bull driver who crashed his car last weekend. Sergio Perez racked up another rumored €1 million repair cost for Red Bull during the Hungarian Grand Prix, apparently making his team the first to cross the €5 million threshold for 2024. After a strong start to the season, Perez has recently recorded more crashes than podiums, putting his race seat at Red Bull under threat. While his greatest crash of the season was at the Monaco Grand Prix, when he was rear-ended by Kevin Magnussen on the first lap after starting in 16th place, which is estimated to have cost Red Bull about $2 million, he made another significant dent in their budget last time out in Hungary. P9 following his first run in Q1 as rain fell on the Hungaroring, Perez took too much curb at turn 8 and lost control on the exit. He collided with the barriers, causing considerable damage to the car's rear end, as well as damage to the front. The damage was apparently valued about €1 million. He needed to replace not only the nose and front wing of his RB20, but also the rear wing, side pods and floor. The front and rear suspensions also needed to be replaced. According to F1 Maximal, Red Bull paid €999,000 for Perez's participation in the first 13 races of the season, bringing his total fee to €3,793,200. That's $1 million more than Williams spent on Alex Albon following his major early season crashes. In fact, due to Perez's massive bill, Red Bull has spent more money on car repairs than Williams by €300,000. When teams are working with a limited budget, the higher the maintenance bill, the less money is available for car upgrades. Perez's Hungarian Grand Prix incident occurred as Red Bull prepared to meet over the summer break to address their driver situation, with the 34-year-old's job on the line. Any discussions we have with him will of course take place internally and not in front of the media, insisted team boss Christian Horner. But of course, we cannot run on one leg. Perez has only 124 points to Max Verstappen's 265 points, and he will be unable to close the 100-point gap after this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix to quell doubts over his future. Thus, Red Bull intends to return the RB20 to its more traditional engine cover specification for the Belgian Grand Prix, but not because its most recent upgrade failed in Hungary. Last weekend, the Milton Keynes-based team significantly redesigned the side pods and engine cover, deleting the distinctive Mercedes-style gullies. The new aim was to maximize downforce, which, while less aerodynamically efficient, was immaterial on a tight and twisty track like the Hungaroring. Finally, the changes proved to be a bit of a letdown, with Max Verstappen, who was solely responsible for the new setup, claiming they did not offer the promised step forward. He is concerned that the lack of improvement may put Red Bull at a competitive disadvantage against the increasingly formidable McLaren team, which is largely regarded as having the fastest car in Formula One right now. Verstappen intends to revert to the old bodywork for this weekend's Belgian Grand Prix, but not because his performance in Hungary was dismal. Instead, it's because Spa-Francorchamps is a track that demands extreme aerodynamic efficiency, and the high-drag version used in Hungary wouldn't work there. So Red Bull has broadened track-specific car modifications, which were previously limited to front and rear wing levels, to include extensive bodywork changes. So, what do you think? Will Max change his power unit this weekend, getting a grid penalty? Let us know in the comments down below.